Okay, welcome. And Maseches Bava Kama, we're on Pei Daled Amud Aleph, starting actually at the bottom of Pei Gimel Amud Beis, which is starting from there. Just a short recap of what we said. We defined the basic thing, a difference between a mazik and a choivel. Anybody want to say what the difference between a mazik and a choivel was? Baruch? Oh.
It doesn't mean that.
Any other volunteers? Sorry, I don't know your name. Parrots.
Mazik is someone who deliberately damages, causes damage, either him or his possessions, and to things and animals. Whereas a polder is someone who does it to a person.
Right.
So it's a person injures a person.
Absolutely. Right. Parrots correctly says a choivel is injuring a person. That's a choivel. Whereas a mazik is someone who damages someone's property. Chovel. Chovel, choivel, chovel, however you want.
The coffee hasn't kicked in yet.
It will soon. So that's the first difference between a choivel as damaging a person, correct, and a mazik. The difference in the dinim. So the main difference in the dinim is that a mazik pays one payment, and that's called nezek, right? One payment called nezek. How much was it worth? If you broke your friend's car window, how much was the window worth? How much is it going to cost to fix it? That's it. If you damaged somebody's shore, how much was the shore? That's what you pay if you're a mazik. Whereas if you're a choivel, you pay 5 payments, as we also saw yesterday, and we're going to go into each one.
Why do we only count damage to an event?
What's
Not to a normal person.
it is. We're talking about damaging a normal person. We're talking about damaging a normal person. What I think you're getting confused with is how you evaluate the damage. Correct, but we're talking about damaging a normal ben choy, a normal person, 100%, man, woman, or child. The question is, how do you evaluate their nezek? And Yosef correctly said the way you evaluate the nezek is by looking at how much their value would have changed on the slave market. Is that if you would look at that person as if they were to be slaves, like in South Africa, right? So you know where no.
In America.
Okay, so you look. That's one way of looking at a person's value. You see how much would it cost this person. You know, before he had his arm chopped off, he was a more talented person. He could have done X, Y, Z. He could have cut you a salad. He could have put your pictures up. He could have fixed your things with his hands. Now the evid without hands is worth much less. And that's the amount that you pay. That's the amount the damager pays. That's just the way of assessing the actual value that was done. But in terms of the victim, we're talking about damaging normal people. Fine.
Question: if a brain surgeon has his hand chopped off, and he has to go to press to put boxes on shelves, how do you evaluate that?
Right. So, what did Rabbi Tachtel answer you? So that would be a big nez. It will be that would be a lot because that person was highly talented before.
You can do brain surgery anymore.
Oh,
we have the nezek based on the value of the person, and that's a one-time payment.
Yes.
And now we're talking about there's an additional payment.
100%. There's 4 additional payments. That's a one-time payment. You're right.
So that isn't that the question?
It's a one-time
payment as a surgeon, okay, which is not much in this country, right?
But it will be a large amount. It will be because that person is more talented. The Rishonim say that clearly. The Rosh I think says clearly a person who's got more capabilities to do more things, his nezek is going to be a one-time whopping amount of money because for the rest of his life he's going to have lost that amount.
But the other payment,
on how old he is?
It would depend on how old he is, how talented he is.
If you're a brain surgeon at 60, is a big difference.
Yes, because that would be shown and the value of how much he changed on the slave market. Exactly, it would make a difference. Yeah.
but now the payments that come afterwards.
The other payments, for example, embarrassment, they're all one-time payments. Just how much do you?
All of them are one-time payments. So what we're talking about is payments that come afterwards.
Payments that you can come afterwards are sheves maybe for the amount he's going to lose the job. We'll see lately.
How long is Shevet?
Sheves is until he's recovered. We'll see those sugas also coming up. Until he's recovered to wherever he's going to be without his arm, then you pay for that period of time. Yeah. Okay, so that's fine. The first sugya, as we started delving into yesterday, was, as we saw in the Chumash, how we know that these psukim of ayin tachas ayin, shein tachas shein, all these things where it seems the Torah is telling us that you should actually inflict the person who did the damage with the same thing that they got. For example, if they chop the friend's arm off, we should chop his arm off. We don't say that. We say it's a mandatory chiyuv. The Torah was requiring a mandatory chiyuv. And the question we saw yesterday was how you know that. So two of the places we see, just to recap, two of the places were we compared Makya Adam to Makya Behema. It was through a Gezeira Shava. Gezeira Shava always means when you have two similar words in one parasha and one in another parasha, they can be similar either in the actual letters or similar in the meaning. We compare the two parashas together. So that was the Gezeira Shava between Makya Adam and Makya Behema. Makya Behema is a person who hits an animal. There's for sure a mandatory payment. There's no discussion. If you damage an animal, you break the animal's leg. There's no ever havamina that you would break the leg of the person who did it. For sure, he pays. He pays the amount that he damaged. So we learn just like Makya Behema pays, so too Makya Adam, if you strike or inflict a wound on your friend, you pay. That was the first makor, and we discussed exactly where that was. And the second one was from the fact that it says, Loi tikhu koifer lenefesh roitzeach. We said that was a pasuk which was referring to a murderer who wants to maybe buy himself out of his chiyav misa. A murderer's chiyav misa is chiyav capital punishment. We kill someone who's a murderer under obviously the right circumstances, that there were aidim, there were witnesses, and with a warning, so we kill him. But if he wants to pay himself out of it, ransom, he cannot. We say he cannot. But there's an extra word in the pasuk that says specifically this nefesh rotzech can't buy himself out. But if he just damaged somebody, then he can pay. Then he should pay, and he must pay. And therefore, that is what we say he can pay. Those are the two sources we learned. So now we're at the bottom of 2 dots on the bottom of page Gimel Amud Beis.
Sorry.
Peretz has a question.
In the case of a murder,
Yeah.
right, because of the lack of evidence, right, there wasn't warning or the agent was accepted. Right? Is there still a punishment for the murderer? Does he have to end up having to do some of these things, pay these things to the person?
I think
it's just one of,
if there's enough aidim that if there's no aidim that he did it, then he can't really pay these things either, because we can't prove that he did these things either. But if you do have enough aidim for these things, then he would. I think if there was damages involved he would pay. He would pay for it.
You're talking about a murder where he gets the death penalty?
But a murderer who gets the death penalty does not pay. Right, correct. Come live with the Rabbi. We do not give a misa and mammon as well. Yeah, but I think Peretz was asking in a case where he didn't. He was in a case where he doesn't get the death penalty.
You can't give him the death penalty.
Right.
Is there still punishment for this murderer?
Right.
That's my question.
Right.
Or is it B'yad Shemayim?
Yeah, it's more if it's not correct aidim, then there's not so much we can do with him, from my understanding. So we're starting on the 4 lines up from the bottom. In the middle of the line it says Tanya. Tanya means a brisa. Rabbi Doistoi ben Yehuda Oimen. Ayin tachas ayin. The pasuk says ayin tachas ayin, and he also explains to us mammon, that it's mammon. The Torah means mammon. That you give mammon, you do not give the actual eye of the perpetrator. So then now the Gemara, he continues. Rabbi Doistoi ben Yehuda continues, and he goes backwards and forwards like often the brises do. Ata oimer mammon. You're saying that it means mammon, that he pays money. Maybe the Torah really means ayin mamash. Amrus, no. What are you going to do in a case if you take things literally? If the victim's eye was a very big eye, I don't know whether it means literally big or very powerful, very good. What is it? 0, right? As a not -1, -2, good, very good. Good working eye. Whereas the Eino Shel Zeh Ktana, but the Mazik's eye wasn't so good. It was small, it wasn't so effective. How are you going to apply the verse of ayin tachas ayin? Tachas means in place of. How can you say that the small eye of the perpetrator, of the choivel, is in place of the more expensive eye of the victim? So therefore that's his way of proving that the Torah must be referring to money. You look at how much the value of the victim's eye was worth, and that you pay. That will be a good kiyum of the pasuk of ayin tachas ayin. You're paying back the value of the eye, and then that is equal. Doesn't matter. That's his way of proving that it can't be literal. If it would be literal, we'd run into a problem when the person's eye who did the chavala, who did the wound is smaller. Then the Gemara suggests, v'chi teim, or the Brisa suggests, kol ki hai shakil minei mamoina. Maybe let's say like this: if the eyes are really equal, then we take it literally. We'll take the verse literally. If the eyes are equal, we'll take an eye under an eye, and then we would say eye and tachas eye, and you take away the eye of the victim. Whereas in the case where they're different, that case you pay. So how do we know that in all cases we want to prove? Obviously, the halacha is in every case you pay. We never take out the eye of the actual person who did the wound, but we always pay. But the Gemara is suggesting if your logic was the reason why you don't pay is because there's a difference in value between the victim's eye and the perpetrator's eye. Maybe in the case where there's a difference, you really do pay. But when the case they're the same, you actually do take out the eye. That's what the Gemara is suggesting. And the Torah says, the Brisa says, "HaTorah Amra Mishpat Echad Yihi Elachem, Mishpat Hashave Lekulchem." The Torah says, this was in one of the psukim we read yesterday, Mishpat Echad Yihi Elachem. You have to have one law. It has to be equal in all the cases. We apply the same law. We're not going to say in some cases you'll take out the eye and in some cases you'll pay. No, the Torah says specifically there always has to be one mishpat, one din, one halacha. And therefore he proves, and since in the case, the mishpat hashave lekulchem, a mishpat that's equal to everybody. So whether the cases where the eyes were not equal in value or whether the eyes were equal in value, in all the cases the halacha is you have to pay because he proves if the eye was big of the victim and the eye was smaller of the perpetrator, in that case you have to pay. So since you have to pay in that case, from there we deduce it in all cases you pay. Right? So then the Gemara says, Amri, Umay Kusha. It's not such a good proof, this the Gemara says. The last line of Peikim Amud Beis, Dilma Nahoira Shakal Minei, Nahoira Amarachmana Nishkol Minei. The Gemara is asking, I think the Gemara is asking on the Brisa, it's not so muvan. We've got a problem with this limud. It's not so foolproof, because maybe we say Nahoira Shakal Minei. Nahoira means like eyesight. Maybe say that the Torah means you took away the eyesight of the victim, so your eyesight should be taken away. And it doesn't, the Gemara is saying, it doesn't really bother us if the eye of the victim was small, or big rather, and the eye of the perpetrator was small. That was the problem that he brought up. How could that be that the small one under a big one? No, we don't look at it in terms of the size of the eye. It's one general thing called eyesight. And he took away eyesight from the person. Maybe we should take away eyesight of the perpetrator who was the chayda. So that's the way the Gemara is asking, that maybe we could learn the pasuk of ayin tachas ayin, meaning literally. It is literally, and it doesn't bother us that one eye is more valuable than the other eye, because the meaning of the verse is eyesight, and in place of eyesight, take away eyesight. That's what the Gemara thinks. If you don't say this kind of limud that we're talking about eyesight, koton shahorag esagodol, right? Someone who was very small. Rashi says Adam Nanas, like a midget or a very, very small person who killed a very big person, or the opposite, Gadol Shahorag Esakoton. How could you kill such a murderer? Because the Torah says the nefesh tachas nefesh. You have to give in the case of a murder, you have to give a nefesh tachas nefesh. And how are you going to do that if the nefesh of the murderer is different to the nefesh of the victim? One's a big person, one's a small person, if there's a difference between them, how do you explain the verse nefesh, tachas nefesh? So obviously it means a life. It doesn't mean literally the size of the person, it means a life under a life. So too, it means over here an eyesight in regards to eyesight. When the Gemara says, how can you kill him? And you can't start saying that in a case where a big person kills a small person, then maybe you'd pay, and in the case where they're the same size, you'd kill them. You can't start changing the dinim. It's always going to be the same thing, and we always are going to kill because we say that a life in place of a life. That's what the Gemara is suggesting, that we've got no raya from here that it means monetary payment, because maybe it means eyesight in place of eyesight. So the Gemara says, he took away a neshama, he took away a life, so we say the murderer has to take away his life. We say you take away that you took away eyesight, we take away your eyesight. This is just a way of proving that we're disproving the proof. In other words, we're being madche the raya. We're taking, there's no proof from your thing that you want to say ayin takas ayin. We'll have to prove from somewhere else. There are other places, but there's no proof from here because perhaps the Torah didn't really meant taking away the raya. Just to summarize, Rabbi Dostoy Rabbi Yehuda wanted to suggest that from the pasuk of ayin tachas ayin, it's clear that it's not talking about money. Because that it's not talking about literally. Because if it was literal, how could, if the person's got a big eye who you took out their eyesight, how can you take out the perpetrator's eye and say that's in place of that? That was much more, and his perpetrator was much less. So it must be a monetary payment. That's what he thought the proof was. And the Gemara says no, it's not a monetary. It's not a proof, because really the Torah means take away his eyesight, and you take away the victim, the perpetrator's eyesight, which is that's a more general thing, which is equal. That is that part of the Gemara. So now the Gemara carries on. Tanya idach. We're going to bring another brisa, another proof for this thing that we're talking about monetary payment and not literal. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai oimer. Rabbi Shimon ben Yochai oimer ayin tachas ayin mammon. He says it means mammon. Ata oimer mammon oy eino ela ayin mamish. How do you know it means mammon? Maybe it means literally the eye. Harei shahoya suma v'simei kiteya v'kita chiger v'chiger. Heichani mekayim bezeh ayin tachas ayin. What would be if a blind person, he is the one who does the crime, and he blinds his friend? Now he's already a blind person. The person who's doing the blinding is already blind. So you can't say in this case that the punishment then would be to make him blind. He's already blind. So it must be in such a case that the Torah is telling me he must pay, because he can't blind him. Similarly, if a person hasn't got an arm and he goes and chops off his friend's arm, somehow without an arm, he manages to do that. He manages to chop off his friend's arm. You can't say the punishment he's going to get is his arm's chopped off, because his arm was already chopped off. So what's his punishment? Must be he pays. Similarly with a chiger. A chiger is a person who hasn't got legs. Then if he inflicts that on his friend, he can't get it. So since you can't get it, then you must be paying. And from there, the Gemara proves that the payment must be a payment. Yeah, Baruch.
See here, it appears that the Svara is very chazak. It's much more superior. Why? When they bring a proof from other psukim, it would seem to stop it that we would use that for something else, because the Svara is so chazak, so passionate, that now we don't need to come out.
As far as passionate, which way around? I don't understand. As far as passionate,
before we argue that, it's not an eye for an eye. Okay, you don't take out the guy's tooth.
Right, you don't. The proof that you don't.
But we see from Rabbi Shimon that you don't have to come out to that. I don't have to use my arsenal of psukim.
Are you saying from this pasuk itself?
Very simple svara.
Yeah.
Now, what do we do with those psukim? First of all,
what ayin
what
tachas?
does he do? What Rabbi Shimon do?
What with ayin tachas ayin and chain
Yeah.
tachas?
Now we don't need to use those to prove that it's not a physical payment. It's a monetary payment.
Right. Some of them, the Gemara does bring drashas from some of them later. What we do with each pasuk, what we do, we'll see about that. The Gemara does bring some, yeah. The Gemara does bring some, yeah. So he wants to. So that's Rabbi Shimon's proof. Is a nice proof. A blind person who blinds somebody else, you can't make him blind. So obviously he has to pay. Maybe I would say, as the Gemara says, maybe I would say that no. Maybe a blind person pays. And someone who's not blind, you really take out their eye. Maybe you split it like we said it before. It's not equal. On that, Rabbi Shimon adds the same thing about Torah. Amra mishpat echad yeh lachem, mishpat hashava lepulchem. The Torah says that has to be one din. Has to be one din, that you can't say some places you pay and some places you take out the eye. You don't say that. Now the Gemara says a question on this as well. Amri, well, my kusha. What's your big problem? Ayin tachas ayin for a blind person. Dilma heicha de efsha. Maybe perhaps when it's possible to take out the eye, the guy who was the perpetrator, he could see, and then you take out his eye. Heicha de lo yefsha, upatrinan lei. The Gemara wants to suggest, perhaps if you can't do it, then you can't do it. If the guy's a blind guy, then he should go off. We're using this not as a real svar, but just as a svar, I think, to be madcha the raya. He should go off. He should be potter. He should be potter. Now, this obviously is not a steer to what we just said. Mishpat echad yeh lachem. Mishpat echad yeh lachem means you can't give two different punishments: one-time payment and one-time taking out the eye. But if you normally take out the eye, just in certain circumstances, you can't do anything. That would be okay. There's the Gemara. If you don't say such a thing, that we sometimes let people get off without anything, then there's a very interesting halach here coming up. Treifa shahora gesashalim. A person who's a treifa. Treifa is a person who's got certain defects that we say within I think 18 or 12 months he's not gonna survive.
Animals 12 months.
With that animals it's 12 months. Okay. I think it could be. I'm not fully sure.
With the, if I'm correct, regarding to the AIDS for Azazel, Chazal found the person that was a traitor in a sense that within a year.
Within a year. Okay, let's go within a year now. Trevor's the person who's got some sort of internal defect or something we know about, he's going to die within a year. He's got certain halachic ramifications to him. We'll see in a second. If he killed a shalem means someone who's not trefa. My avdinan lay. What do we do with him? Now here Rashi explains, this is really a Gemara somewhere else, that this is to do the halacha of a bit Eidim Zoimimim. What happens if a trefa kills someone? A trefa kills someone, and really the halacha is, we know a murderer who kills with the right Eidim and everything, as we said before, he gets killed. He gets the death penalty. But a trefa who kills somebody, there's a big problem over here that we can't really have Eidim against him. Why not? Why can't I have Eidim against him? Because in order to have Eidim, I think you also learned this with Rabbi Teichtel, you have to have a halacha called Eidus She'ata Yochol Lahazim. Eidus has to be, always has the potential of becoming Eidim Zoimim. Eidim Zoimim means when two people stand up in Bezdin and say, we saw X, Y, Z, there's always the potential that two other Eidim will come in and say, how could you have seen this thing happening in Ramat Bet Shemesh in the morning, you saying that Pliny killed someone? You were actually with us in Yerushalayim on Sunday morning. You couldn't have seen it. That's the classic case of Eidim Zoimim, that they were found to be plotting witnesses because they were actually couldn't have been on site where they say they were. And the Torah prescribes them the punishment of Kasher Zomam. Vasisem loy Kasher Zomam. You have to do to them what they plotted to do to their friend. If they plotted against their friend, the Eidos Sheker, that he was a murderer, then and they found Zoimim, then just like they were plotting to give him Misa, then they're going to get then they are going to get Misa. If they were plotting to give him Malchus, let's say they said about the guy that he ate some non-kosher food or something, and he's Chayav Malchus, and then they were found Zoimim, they get the punishment of Malchus on themselves. Basically, the bottom line is that there's always a potential that Eidim are found to be Zoimim, and they get a punishment. Whereas as it comes to a treifa, if two Eidim are being made about a treifa, halachically a treifa is considered a dead person in a certain extent. So therefore, when people are made about a treifa that he's a murderer, they're not those Eidim can always come and say, we weren't really coming to kill a person who was alive. We were coming to kill it. What the Gemara calls a Gavra Katela. They were plotting to kill a Gavra Katela. Again, a treifa who's a murderer. We say they were plotting to kill him, but when they found Zomim, they don't get Kash Zomam because they've always got this excuse. They say we were just killing a dead guy. He was a dead guy walking. He was going to die very soon. So that wasn't really a plot that was going to be mechayev them. So basically, they can't become Eidim Zomim. And there's another ramification of that is that the Eidus doesn't even start off with. Meaning, two people that are made about a treifa that killed, you can't even accept their Eidus at all. Because it's an Eidus that cannot become Zomim. Because if it would become Zomim, they could argue that they were going to kill a treifa. So the Eidus doesn't start off with to the beginning. The point that at the end of the day, what comes out is that two Eidim that are made about a treifa that killed, we don't do anything to the treifa because we haven't got good Eidos against him, because the Eidos can't be made Zomim. Just 1 second. So therefore, just like we let him go off scot-free, so maybe the Gemara is suggesting that a blind person who blinds somebody else could also go off scot-free. Was that clear about the Eidim Zomim, or should we speak it again?
Nothing was done to the moment.
Yeah, we don't do anything to them because but even when they're not Zomim, we don't do anything to the treifa either, because there's no halachically kosher Eidus against the treifa, because that Eidus cannot ever have in it kasher zomam, because they can always say we were just talking about a dead person, we were just plotting against a dead person. So therefore, that Eidus cannot have kasher zomam. So it's not kosher, that Eidus, and therefore we actually leave him get off scot-free. So the Gemara is just bringing that as an example. It's an interesting comparison. So too, perhaps it's an argument on what Rabbi Shimon said. That Rabbi Shimon said a blind person that blinds, what are we going to do to him? So the Gemara is suggesting maybe we do nothing to him. What can we do? Sometimes we have these cases in halacha that we just can't catch the guy. So maybe a blind person who does it, we don't catch. But someone who's not blind, we really take out their eye. That's what the Gemara is suggesting over here. Now let's go to another limud. Debei Rabbi Yishmael. It's about 10 lines down or something from the top. Debei Rabbi Yishmael Tana. Omakra ki kain yinosen boy. The pasuk says, the complete pasuk says, anybody who's got a Gemara which brings the psukim on the side, it says shever ta. I'll just read the pasuk. Shever tachas shever, ayin tachas ayin, shein tachas shein, kasha yitain mum ba'adam, kain yinosein boy. This is one of the psukim we read yesterday. As he gives a mum and his friend, kain yinosein boy. So too should be given to him. And he explains that ein nesina ela mammon. Nesina means mammon. Nesina means to give, and that means mammon. So that asks the Gemara, ela mayata, if that's true that nesina means mammon, kasha yitain mum ba'adam, hachanami de mammon who? The Torah says when a person gives a mum to his friend, that also means mammon. That certainly doesn't mean mammon. When you give a mum to your friend, it means you gave him a mum, you gave him a bruise, you gave him a blow. Doesn't mean you gave him mammon, even though the Torah says yitain. So how can you say that you wanted to say that yitain means giving money? It doesn't mean giving mammon, because you see that the beginning of the pasuk says earlier in the pasuk it says as he gave a mum to his friends. That's not mammon. So the Gemara says Omri de Bishmo Kra Yasera Darshi. They weren't saying that a general rule that yitain always means giving money. They were coming from an extra pasuk michti. Let's see. See if it says already ishki yitain mum ba'amisoy kasher osa kene oseloi. The Torah already told us a few psukim earlier in this parasha. Yeah, a few psukim earlier it says when a person gives a mum to his friend, as he gave, so you to give to him. Keni nosin boy lamali. Why do you need the second person to repeat Keni nosin boy? If it's just a simple understanding, is you give it literally. Why does it repeat it again? Shma mino mamoin. Must be that it's referring to giving money. Otherwise, why did the Torah repeat it again? So then the Gemara says, Kasha yitin mum ba'adam lamali. Why do you need the beginning of the pasuk of Kasha yitin mum ba'adam? Why is that necessary? The Gemara just says, I did the boy lemichtav keni nosin boy. Kosav nami kasha yitin mum ba'adam. That's why the Torah wrote the beginning. In other words, basically, the whole thing's extra just to teach me that it's a mandatory payment. That's another limud. Fine. Another one. So there's a lot of limudim over here, just to teach me the same principle that ayin, takas ayin is not literal. The Beirei B'chiyatana, Omakra, Yad B'Yad. The Torah says also in the parasha actually of Edom Zomim, it says, I'll read the pasuk, Loi Tochis Einecha, Nefesh B'Nefesh, Ayin B'Ayin, Shein B'Shein, Yad B'Yad, Regel B'Regel. We say that you have to give a Yad B'Yad, right? This is, as I said, it's referring to an Eid Zomim, and it teaches me that if, Rashi explains, if the Eidus gives Eidus, that the friend cut off his friend's hand, Reuven cut off Shimon's hand, and then they were found to be Zoimimim. So the Torah says Yad B'Yad. Sounds like we should cut off the hand of Eidim Zoimimim. But we say no. Davar Hanitein Miyad Liyad. It's referring to, there's a play on the words over here. Yad B'Yad means something which is given from hand to hand. What's given normally in hand to hand? Mammon. Mammon, right? Mammons, I don't know about today when we use credit cards, but for certainly it used to be money was given from hand to hand. You give change, you take change, you pay. This davar which was given from hand to hand, that's mammon. So he darshans Yad B'Yad is mammon. Elamayata, the Gemara says, regel beregel, nami hochihu. How are you going to learn the process regel beregel? Now, what's given from foot to foot? I don't know, but not money, right? So therefore, we're proving that how can you really darshan Yad B'Yad? How are you going to understand regel beregel? Omri debere b'chia, kra yaseirika darshi. No, they weren't saying Yad B'Yad literally that hand from hand. It's again the repetition, the superfluous word. Michti ksiv vasisem like ashes omam. If it says by Eidim Zoim, maybe you have to give them the punishment that they wanted to afflict. Isal Gadaitich Mamish Yad B'Yad Lamali. If it was literally that they said that he cut off his hand and they found Zoimim, we should cut off their hand, and the Torah says, do to them what they plotted to give, why does the Torah have to write Yad B'Yad? We know you'd cut off the hand. Shma Minah Mamon. Regel B'Regel Lamali. But why still do you need Regel B'Regel? The Gemara says, I did Ksiv Yad B'Yad, Ksiv Nami Regel B'Regel. It's just stylistically repeating. If we said Yad B'Yad, we say Regel B'Regel, but it's not really coming to prove to me anything extra. It's just coming to say Yad B'Yad is extra, so it teaches me Mama. Fine. But yes, Rob.
Really doesn't belong there, or we're saying that stylistically you have to have it.
I don't think you have to have it there. It doesn't really belong there, but the Torah wrote it to be parallel to Yad B'Yad. So a way of speaking, obviously.
We don't want to say, we don't want to come out and say that not extra words. Normally we say every word.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Yeah.
That is true. Sometimes when it comes to a brisa or a mishnah, sometimes we say stylistically the mishnah wrote it this way to do the flip side. But according to the Torah, that's very true. That's a very good question. How do we say that the Torah just decided to write regel? It could be there is some other kind of drasha from it that I'm not aware of. But in terms of this Gemara, that's a good question. We do find sometimes the concept of dibra Torah b'loshem b'nei Adam. That sometimes the Torah does write things in the terms of the way people speak. So maybe that applies over here. Maybe not. But it's a good question. It's a valid question. Yeah. Morphorism or something. Anthropomorphism.
Yes, thank you. In that perspective, so that we can understand how the Torah couches things in a way
that we see it. But here we're not referring to Hashem's actions. We're referring to this. Yeah. That's a valid question. Abai Oimer. Beginning of the line starts with Abai. He's going to bring another makor for the fact that it's not literal. Asyom in the Tanakh Debei Chizkiah. We'll learn it out from the School of Academy of Debei Chizkiah. The Tanakh Debei Chizkiah. Ayin tachas ayin, nefesh tachas nefesh. Oh, the Torah says an eye for an eye and a nefesh for a nefesh, right? V'loi nefesh v'ayin tachas ayin. The Torah doesn't say you should give a life and an eye in replace of an eye. Meaning, if you think it's literal, that's what the Gemara speaks it out. But isal kadaitech mamash. If you think the Torah means take out the eye of the person literally, zimnin de mashkachas lo ayin v'nefesh tachas ayin. Sometimes you're going to have a case that the perpetrator is going to lose his eye and his life. Why? The bahadi de iverle nafkele nishmase. It could be accidents happen, and when you're in the process of blinding the person who did the crime, maybe things will get a bit carried away and it'll end up, killing him, or maybe blinding the guy will kill him, and that will be bad because the Torah says ayin tachas ayin. Give an eye in place of an eye. Don't give a life and an eye in place of an eye. The guy took away an eye. It's not fair, it's not right, obviously, to take away his life and his eye. So since there's always a concern that perhaps when taking away the eye of the perpetrator, you're going to take away his life as well, that proves to me that it shouldn't be done. That shouldn't be the correct way of doing things, because there's always a concern that anyway, you're going to end up doing more than you're supposed to be doing, and his life might be taken away. So therefore, he proves that it can't be ayin literally. But the Gemara doesn't like that either. The Gemara says, "My kusha, what's the problem? What's the problem? Maybe these things will happen. Dilma meimad amdinan lei. We'll do some sort of medical evaluation and see, is this guy really capable of taking his eye out and staying alive? Imatzi mekabel avdina. If he can do it, we'll take out his eye. Ve'iloi matzi mekabel loy avdina. And if he can't do it, we won't take it out. Ve'i amdinan dematzi mekabel ve'avdinan lei. And if it will be that sometimes, even when you make evaluations, sometimes mistakes happen, and we didn't evaluate properly, or maybe there was some complication down the line, and you actually end up killing him. Says the Gemara, it's not the end of the world that he dies. Why? Do we not learn in the Mishnah in Makkas, Amduhu umeis tachas yadoi potter? We know the halacha by Malkus, if a person does an Aveira, normally a lois saseh, the chayav Malkus, right? Lois saseh, normally the standard prescribed punishment of a negative prohibition in the Torah of a lois saseh is Malkus. How many Malkus, anybody? 39. Good. Good. Yes.
We should really apply the principle there.
That the Gemara says in Marcus why we only give 39 and not 40.
We should also have it here.
But one second, what I want to say is a different point. And the Mishnah in Marcus says that what about a person who cannot withstand 39 Malchus? What do we do to him? We give him less. We evaluate how much he can take in one shot, and we give him less. So, but the Mishnah says over there in Marcus, what happens if we evaluated this guy can take, 12 Malchus, and we didn't realize he actually could only take 5 or 6, and he actually dies? So what happens? Potter. Who's Potter? The person who was lashing who was doing the Malchus, he's actually Potter. Why? Because he was doing whatever he was supposed to be doing, and we go according to what the oimit was. Oimit means the evaluation. We made an evaluation he could withstand 1 second a certain amount, and if we made the evaluation wrong, nobody's to blame. It wasn't on purpose. So you're potter. So the Gemara is comparing, just like we find by Malchus. The principle is, even if you give extra Malchus, but you're going to be more than you actually. Sorry, you did an oimid. You evaluated you could do a certain amount, but actually you were wrong in your evaluation. But even still, the person who prescribes, who's giving the Malchus is potter. So to over here, you're right. We say ayin takas ayin. You are worried that maybe if you take out this guy's eye, maybe the perpetrator's eye, if you take it out, maybe that's going to bring with it also the death. As long as you made an umdana and a proper evaluation to make sure that wasn't going to happen, even in rare cases that it might happen, it's still potter. It's not the end of the world, as we see from the case of Malchus. So too, the Gemara is asking that your proof to Be'er B'chizkiah is not foolproof. It's we've got a question on it. Because perhaps ayin takas ayin really means literally. And yeah, one second, ayin takas ayin really means literally. But normally we'll make an evaluation that the perpetrator can have his eye out. And in the cases where the evaluation was wrong, the rare cases, then it's nishkefelig, as you say in Yiddish. It's not the end of the world, because as long as you did the right thing in the right evaluation. That's what the Gemara wants to suggest over here. Yeah, parents?
In the case of Zomanu, you have a situation where they're bringing evidence that this person did the injury. Ruby did the injury to Shimon, right? Yeah, he took his eye out.
Right.
Shimon was beaten up. The perpetrator, right? Ruby went away, and then the agent come along,
Right.
and they did that. So
Correct.
in that case, the principle is that the agent get what he wants to put on the person.
Right. Correct.
So we're learning here that those agents don't get their eyes taken out, or do they?
They do not. We're learning from here that they do not, but that will show us that obviously what they wanted to give him was also to pay. In other words, the Torah is telling us that Eidim Zomim pay, but that's an indirect way of saying that the perpetrator, if he would have not been found Zomim, and if he would really be liable, he has to pay. So it's the same punishment. It ends up being right. Correct. It ends up being the same punishment. Right. We're learning from there. Yeah. Oh, let's go a bit more. Rav Zvid Mishmei the Rabba Omar. Omar Kro, Petza Tachas Petza. We have a special pasuk of Petza Tachas Petza. That's an extra pasuk. Here, Baruch, one of these are one of these extra pasuk. Here we learn one of them what they teach us. Petza Tachas Petza. Litein Tsar b'mokom nezek. You have to pay tsar b'mokom nezek, meaning even though you're paying the monetary value, like we said, you view him as if he's an eved, how much was he worth with his hands, how much is he worth without that, you're paying a nice lump sum of money. Even though you're paying that, you still have to pay tsar. In other words, excuse me, we don't say that the payment of tsar is only in a case where there was, let's say, no nezek. You just cause someone a bit of tsar, you burn them a little bit on their fingernail or something, you cause them tsar, you didn't cause any nezek, then you have to pay. You even have to pay nezek even when you pay tsar. In other words, we don't say that tsar is included in the nezek. Right. If you're going to say mamash, if you're going to say that it means you actually, that it's really mamash, that you have to do literally to the perpetrator what he did, how can you say that that you're going to give to the person what he wanted to give to, what he gave to the other person, because he's going to get tsar? In other words, here we have a limud that you have to pay tsar b'mokom nezek, right? I think what the Gemara means is like this: tsar for sure, you have to pay. There's no discussion about that. You have to pay tsar. The question was, what about nezek? Do you also have to pay nezek, or do you just get the nezek? So the Gemara is saying, if it will be literal that you get your eye taken out or whatever it is, then that also comes with it tsar, right? There's going to be tsar to the person, to the perpetrator who did the chayv. He's going to get the tsar. So why should he have to pay tsar as well? In other words, if things are literal, then just like you gave that guy, you chopped off his arm and you caused him tsar, if things are literal, you are going to have your arm chopped off and you are going to have tsar. So why would you have to pay on top of that the tsar that you caused him? Hooray, you're getting tsar yourself. So therefore, the Gemara is saying it must be that you pay. It must be that you are paying. Then the Gemara says, Umay Kusha, what's the problem? Dil me'ike inish the mefanik, islay tsayra tfei, the ike inish the loy mefanik, leislay tsayra, lamay nafkimina, the meisvei leheach the beini beini. Okay, we'll stop with this. What the Gemara is suggesting is maybe you're going to have someone who, let's say, is very, very strong. Let's say the victim is a strong person. So for him, the tsar was actually not very much. A small amount of tsar. I don't know whether you chopped off his arm. That's quite very painful. But let's say you gave the guy a bruise in his arm. but this guy's a bodybuilder, he's a muscular guy, his tsar is minimal, right? So then, no, maybe they say it the opposite way around. Let's say that the victim is a very weak guy and he had a lot of tsar, right? So that he had a lot of tsar, but the person who did the crime was a very strong guy. He had a little bit of tsar. So then what you do is you do it literally. You do it literally to the person, and the victim got more tsar. So then you'll pay for the more tsar. In other words, only if the argument was only true if the tsars were equal. So that doesn't make sense that he gets the tsar, the person who did the crime, the choivet, he gets the tsar and he pays for tsar. It doesn't make sense. But the Gemara is saying it does make sense in a case where the tsar that he got is much less than the tsar that he inflicted. And in terms of the same bruise for one person, for the victim could have been a lot, but for the perpetrator a little bit, and then he has to pay the tosefes of that tsar. So therefore, there's no proof from here that we're not talking about monetary, because maybe we are talking about monetary. Just he has to add on the excess tsar that he caused to the other person. Yeah. Well.
So then the person.
If it goes the other way, that the victim had a little bit of tsar, you're right. Then it wouldn't be fair. Then it wouldn't be fair to afflict.
Now you don't have an equal hit.
Yeah. So then maybe in that case also you would have the Gemara would prove you'd have to pay. In that case also would be a proof that maybe it doesn't make sense to do it literally, or maybe even we'll pick up from here tomorrow. Maybe that's actually what the Gemara means, but we'll pick up from here tomorrow. All the best.
Yeah.